Absolutely. Like, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll say that now. I'll say it again at the end. I've been doing this now for what, a year and a half now? I think the first time was in the spring of 24. So I've been able to meet a ton of people through it. The way to go about doing it, obviously, is connecting with me, and then from there, taking the conversation on there and even offline as well. But thank you for jumping on to hear my talk. I will pull up my slides, make sure at the end, obviously, we'll cover some Q&A as well. But really excited for everybody to have taken some time out of their Tuesday morning to hang out with me and talk through how to stop spray and praying when it comes to business development, which is the main purpose of today's talk. So a little bit about me. I know Ben just kind of introduced me, but I've been now in recruitment slash sales 15 years. I just put up a post about the other day. I've been coaching since I was like 16, so 20 plus years. And what I've been doing now for the better part of 2 years is helping recruitment business owners, even recruiters, solo operators as well, to help systematize their BD outreach, systematize everything from BD, from prospecting to outreach to how you run discovery meetings, anything in between from the moment leads found till deals close and beyond. My job is to help systematize everything that you're doing to make your lives easier, more efficient, and then also the goal being to eventually scale if you were to hire somebody on your team as well. And again, as it says there, my main mission is to help you stop winging it. There's too many people in the space who are just out there winging it. They've got a lot of ups, but then that's followed by a lot of down periods, that feast and famine cycle a lot of people go through. And I personally believe a lot of it has to do with a lack of systems. They don't know why they're even successful in Q1, and then they have a bad Q2, and then they're having a good Q3, and then they're wondering why Q4 is bad. It all comes down to a lack of systems as far as I'm concerned. So the goals for today, just my main goals are what I hope you walk away from today as this whole purpose of the summit that Ben has put together is to help you finish the year strong, obviously, as the title alludes to. But I want to help walk through or at least get you some thought provoking in terms of how you assess your own current system. For some people I've personally worked with, they've had nothing in place. For others, they're a $10 million firm and there's things they're doing well, but there's some gaps in their system and they need some help in order to get a second set of eyes on it to help figure out where things are falling apart. So I want to help you with today's talk to self-assess, right? You don't need to work with someone like me. You should be able to walk away from today's talk and say, okay, based on everything I learned, here's some things I could probably implement starting today. And that's actually one of the biggest things I have at the very end is I want to give you a tactical play. You can literally leave today and start doing it this afternoon in order to start driving new business forward. So we're going to walk through three phases. As my topic said, stop, spray, and pray forever, three-phase breakdown. We'll walk through each one, provide some details in each one as well, with again, the ultimate goal of giving this a very in-depth tactical side of things. I know in this space, right, strategy is important. That is part of what we'll cover a little bit, but I also think there is a need when it comes to the tactical plays. How do I actually go out and execute these things? Yes, I know I want to win new business, but what do I need to do on a step-by-step basis to get there? And that's the purpose of today's talk. So, as I said, been doing this now for 2 plus years, 10 plus years, actually 15 plus years now when it comes to how I would approach a new territory and how I've helped recruitment business owners do the same now from a coaching and consulting perspective. So we're going to walk through how you go about identifying what we're going to do from research perspective, and then ultimately how do we engage with these prospects, right? Because as far as I'm concerned, the goal of engaging is to start a conversation. It's not necessarily to get a meeting, which I think some people are in a binary mindset. They think, oh, this outreach has to lead to a meeting, otherwise it's a failure. That's not necessarily the case. Sales is a long game, right? We're building for the long term. All the little things we do today will pay off in Q1 and Q2. And some of the things we learned today from our outreach will help set us up to actually get the meeting later on as well. So that's another little piece I want to make sure everyone keeps in mind is the goal of outreach is not necessarily to just get a meeting right then and there. It's to have a conversation and figure out where it needs to go from that point forward. And at the end, too, slides and props. If you stay at the end, I will drop a link. I know obviously Ben's giving the replay. I'm giving away I got like 25 slides today. If you stay at the end, I'll drop a link. You just sign up, you get all the slides. I've got a few AI prompts that are mixed in here as well. Those are all yours. It's kind of like my gift for attending. So problems I see in the space right now, and have been now, is there's too much spray and pray. It's everywhere, right? There's people that are going after thousands of accounts and ultimately not making any traction as a result. And they're sitting there wondering why. And more often than not, it's because they're trying to be everyone to everyone, right? Meaning they're trying to be a recruiter to everyone out there, and ultimately, as a result, they're not getting anyone's attention. Their generic messages are getting ignored, of course, because they're a generalist recruiter. There's nothing special about what you're saying. You sound like everybody else, and ultimately, you end up getting ignored because of that reason as well. There's no clear account prioritization, meaning they put the same amount of effort in what I would consider like a C-level account that they put in an A-level account. And you should be, right? Or spoiler alert, we'll cover this in a minute, but you should be prioritizing your accounts from a territory plan perspective because not every account is worth the same amount of time. There's going to be some accounts that, quite frankly, you shouldn't be prospecting into. They should be kicked out of your territory. They shouldn't be worth your time because ultimately your biggest resource, and it's cliche, but your biggest resource in the space is your time. And where you spend your time is very, very important when it comes to your BD activities. If I'm prospecting into a low value, low ROI account, well, I might even get one placement out, but that's all I get for the next year. When you could have been better spent that time prospecting into those more high level, what I consider like A-level accounts with repeat business, better fees, less competition, and ultimately more worth your time. All then this last kind of bullet point too, fighting to get meetings with decision makers. Too many people go after the same people over and over again, meaning like they just go after the C-suite and they bang their head against the wall and they say, well, I can't get a meeting, I can't get a meeting, and they move on. When in actuality, if they'd gone a level below or maybe two levels below, they could have gotten those meetings, gotten some buying committee together, and ultimately gotten in front of that CEO by taking a bottom-up approach, which is something we'll cover here as well. But ultimately, the biggest problem, the result of what I see with all these problems is low win rates, right? Inconsistent revenue, ups and downs quarter over quarter. And then, of course, if you are leading a team, your team ultimately gets burnt out because they're not seeing the success they want to see. You as a leader are not getting the success from the team you hope to get from them as well. And as a result, you're going to have some turnover, you have some unhappy employees, and overall, it's just not a good experience for anybody. So the solution, right? What we're going to cover today, right? That's the problem. Here's the solution. We're going to break through we'll walk through three different phases. And what I ultimately think you should be working smarter, not harder. Again, cliche saying, but if we do this the right way, if we prioritize the right accounts, if we take the right approach, we can then have higher upside with less number of accounts. We don't need to target 500 plus accounts with our sales outreach because there's only so much time in the day and we can't get to all of that the right way. Yes, in today's world, could I drop 1,000 names in here and send out one email to 1,000 people? Yeah, I could, but am I actually going to have much success with it? The answer is no. Your message will fall on deaf ears because ultimately your message is not going to be relevant to all 1,000 people that are in there. So phase one, right? Let's jump into this. Building your ICP. This might sound rudimentary, like basic, but I have learned now over the last 2 years working with recruitment business owners, just because they've had some success doesn't mean they've built out their ICP, which to me at times is a little bit shocking when I hear that, but they don't even know who their ideal client profile is. They're going after a multitude of different verticals, different positions from accounting and finance to IT to life sciences. They'll do it all. And as a result, they're stretching themselves way too thin and they're falling into that generalist bucket. And when they do reach out to other prospects, they're not cutting through the noise because they are a generalist because of all the work they've done prior. So ultimately, when you're going into figuring out who your ICP is, the first question you ask yourself is who deserves your attention? Like, who do you want to work with? And I think there's two ways you can go about figuring that out. One, if you've had some success, look back and do an audit of your placements and say, where have I had the most success? And not just in revenue side, but we're talking things like time to fill. Maybe your placement fee is higher in certain industries. Maybe you even have more fun in a certain industry as well. Because as we're knowing right now and have known for the last couple of years, it's not always an up market, right? Sometimes there's that bear market, things aren't going well. And if you aren't enjoying your job, if you don't enjoy the industry you're working in, it's going to lead to some serious burnout problems. So ultimately, if there is high upside, we do enjoy working it, that may be a direction you want to take. Now, the other side, you might say, hey, look, I haven't had a ton of success. I'm really kind of starting out from scratch. I don't even know where to begin. I always say, hey, lean into your previous experiences. Because I know there's a lot of people that get in this space, especially as solo operators, who came from an industry that they were an individual contributor in, right? So, for example, I work with a firm here who was a medical device, and the business owner himself was a medical device engineer by trade before jumping in the recruiting industry. So, for something like that, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to go outside of that vertical. You should stay within there, double down on that, and ultimately figure out who is it I should be reaching out to and who ultimately deserves my attention. And when I say like key questions here, I'm not going to walk through each one, but ultimately we do need to figure out who is the ICP, and I'm going to cover what we can do, what framework you can use to help create that for yourself, and then ultimately the titles we're going after and the buyer personas that we're going to create as well, which we'll cover here in a few more slides too. But here's a pretty general ICP framework. And I say general in the sense like it is very simplistic, but simple is king as far as I'm concerned. Could you go deeper than this? Absolutely, right? You can go down. I've got some clients that, hey, do they have HR or not? Because that's qualifying or disqualifying for us, right? We can go as far as company size slash revenue size slash projected growth. Like those are all qualifications we can add into this. But from just a general starting point, I don't think you can go wrong using this framework and saying, hey, based on my previous, right, if we're looking at previous placements, I found I've had a lot of success in the 50 to 500 company size space here in Chicagoland within the med device industry, specifically within the quality department, right? Great. That to me is a really, really good starting ICP to move forward with. And ultimately, this ICP is going to refine and change and adapt over time. As I've told people, think of it like a bullseye, right? When we're starting off, if you've ever played darts, just hitting the board itself is a win. But as you get better, as you get more refined, right, ultimately you want to get closer and closer to the target. The same applies for your ICP. We're going to start, maybe it's not the exact bullseye we want to get to, but that example I gave, it fits within the first couple rings of the bullseye. And as I go on and find out I get better and better at this, and I'm having more success in this particular area, I get closer and closer to hitting that target. And eventually, we want to get to the point where we're only working with that bullseye or just the ring right outside of that from an ICP perspective. And pain points are at the bottom. You're gonna hear me talk about this ad nauseum today, but when it comes to our prospects world, we need to do a better job of understanding what keeps them up at night, not what we do. And I'll cover here in a few slides why that's important, but ultimately we need to start getting in their world and start thinking like them and what keeps them up at night, not about, hey, this is what I do and here's the recruiting service side. Like there's too many I people out there. It should be about they and them all the time when it comes to your outreach, when it comes to your discovery meetings, everything should be about them focused. I said it already, but not all accounts are created equal. There are going to be some accounts that you're going to need to kick out of your territory plan. There's going to be some accounts you're going to want to double down on as well. But I think just overall, how you can look at it is, and this is how I was taught, an ABC model, right? So your A accounts you see on here, your top 20, 30%, these are the ones that are going to drive high revenue. They're the ones that can bring in repeat placements. They're the ones most likely, or hopefully I should say, with low competition, good rates, right? They're not trying to squeeze us on margins. They're not dropping us from 25 down to 18%. They're not lumping us into the VMS system with 20 other competitors, right? Those are all knocks against the account as far as I'm concerned. That actually starts moving them down my ranking list because I would much rather work with an account where I'm getting 4 to 6 from the direct hire space, 4 to 6 placements a year, minimal red tape, minimal competition. I'd rather work with that than an account that say has 15 open roles a year, but I've got to compete against 5 other people. My win rates drops dramatically, and as a result, my time to ROI is going to increase, meaning the amount of hours I have to put in to actually get the ROI from it is going to go higher and higher. And ultimately, the question becomes, am I better off taking that time and putting it somewhere else? And if you go about ranking your accounts this way, you can then start making some objective decisions on what to do with those accounts. And I also think, and I always tell this kind of metaphor when it comes to ABC's accounts too, is we need to have them all, right? The A accounts with high upside, typically, because there are high upside, there's probably a few more hurdles we got to get through to ultimately win the business. They can take a little bit longer of a sales cycle. But we know once we get in, we're getting multiple business, so it's totally worth it. The C accounts, those are ones maybe 1 or 2 recs a year, much easier. The minimal red tape, we can get in quickly, like awesome. But when we do our territory plan, when we kind of take our accounts and put them down on a piece of paper and say, here's what I'm going after this quarter, we need a healthy mix. Think of it like a diversified portfolio. The other way I've kind of said it is think of it like a jar, and we're trying to fill that thing to the brim, and you've got next to it, you've got rocks, gravel, and sand. We need all those things, all those components together to actually fill the jar without any gaps into it. And your C accounts and your B accounts, for example, while they may not have as high of ROI, they are needed in order for us to hit our number. So when you do this and you look at your accounts, make sure we have a healthy mix of them because I've seen people go through this exercise. We pull it up and they've got nothing but A accounts. To which I'm like, hey, that's great. There's some high upside, but also we want to win some business today, right? That's where we need to mix in those B's and C's to get some business, get some money into the business this quarter while continuing to prospect in the A's that might not break until Q1, Q2, Q3, or beyond, depending on the company size. So that's just high level overview of in terms of taking the accounts, our ICP, right? We've got our ICP. We say, okay, great. Now I need to go out and find the accounts that actually fit the ICP. Then becomes the research part next, right? So far, just like a quick recap, we built our ICP. If we go back to their framework, we've got it mapped out for us. We've now identified the accounts that fit it. And if they do not fit your ICP, get them out. Do not waste time prospecting into accounts that are not your ICP. Because every minute you are wasting on a non ICP, you cannot get back. You need to spend your time wisely or spend your team's time wisely when it comes to prospecting. Now we need to obviously do the research next, right? We've got our list. I said it was on the slide a few minutes ago, but I personally believe, right, less is more in this space. So I don't need 500 accounts to go after. I always tell people start with 50 and then work from there, right? See what you can manage from an account perspective in order to make sure they're actually reaching out to the appropriate people. We're staying on top of our goals we'll be setting for ourselves, so on and so forth. Because if you have 500 accounts, if each account has, let's say, roughly 5 leads, that's 2,500 people we're gonna have to be reaching out. That's for most people, that's too much. It's basically borderline impossible. Now you can put in some tools that maybe help you out there here or there, but ultimately, like you're gonna have a watered down message. You're not gonna have relevant messaging, and ultimately, you're gonna lead to, I think, a lot of frustration and failure. So I always tell people, hey, start small. That's why I say, hey, create a top 50 of accounts that fit your ICP and start prospecting into them. Now, understand that top 50 again is a living, breathing document. It will not remain the same from now until the end of the year because as you're doing this, and we'll cover some more how we do the outreach, but as we learn more and more about these accounts, some will get kicked out, right? Some will be replaced, some will become a higher priority, some will become a lesser priority. It is a constant evolving, living, breathing document, but by having those top targets, we have a focus of who we're going after from a quarter by quarter basis. So again, quick recap. We've got our ICP, we've got our top accounts selected. Now it's time to actually do some research on those, not just from a company perspective, but we're going to start building out what I would call like buyer personas. It was taught to me like buyer persona and battle cards, but ultimately we want to start systematizing who it is we're going to be reaching out to from a buyer persona perspective, which will allow us to create some frameworks and templates around our outreach messaging based on the buyer personas and the companies as well. So company research, I was very selective on kind of like what I wanted to put on this slide because I know for me personally, I always tell people that I think someone like who's in my space, a coach consultant, right? If they come in and their first recommendation is to go buy more tools, I don't think you're doing it the right way. I always like to think, hey, our job is to come in, assess what you currently have, and work within those confines slash tools to start, and then later on look to add on to there. So when it came to company research, I basically try to say, okay, what are tools that everyone has access to, right? I know LinkedIn, right? There's Sales Nav, there's Recruiter, there's a lot of different ways you can go from the platform itself. But I would say almost every one of us has some sort of paid version of LinkedIn, so I kept it in there. But the rest of this stuff you can go out and basically get for free, right? So we can look at company website. We can see things like expansion plans or company news, right? Those things are important when doing research because, as I said about the living, breathing document, if I see a company just announce that they're expanding into Utah to build out a brand new site in Q1, well, obviously some hiring is going to need to occur. And that to me just became a higher priority account because of some of the news that I'm seeing from the company website. LinkedIn, again, there's various different products now, and even me, like I get annoyed with what LinkedIn's doing, some of the stuff, but for the most part, I think most of the products you can see things like their job openings. If they're constantly having the same jobs that are open quarter over quarter, to me that signifies there's some retention challenges they're probably having, or they could be growing too. They might be just adding new headcount. But again, that is some key information that would move them further up. That might make them an A account when before they were a C based on some of the research I did. So I'm going to spend more time prospecting into them and going after them over the course of the next quarter and beyond. 360 calls. I think this is, I think it's really overlooked, right? I think if you are a smaller firm, most firms have the 360 model, right? Both recruiting and sales focused. One individual has to do both. And I think a lot of people miss the mark when it comes to talking to candidates and not having their sales cap on as well. Meaning, if I'm talking to a manager and they're on the job market, the first thing you should be focused on is obviously helping them land a job. But I also should be asking some questions and understanding what's going on at their current company that may or may not be of benefit from a sales side as well. So doing these 360 calls allows us to get some great candidates we could potentially NPC later on, but also understand, hey, is the account, aka is the company they're working at right now, is it one I should be prospecting into based on the conversation I'm having with this manager, director, VP, and even a supervisor to that matter. They know a lot of what's going on. They know way more than we'd ever be able to figure out via doing research on websites. So let's ask some questions and uncover some gems in the course of that conversation we can use in our BD outreach later on. Networking events too. I think they're becoming more and more popular. I think, and this is my own 2 cents, with the rise of AI and all this technological push, I think people are yearning to get back to in-person events, to shake someone's hand, and ultimately work with some like-minded individuals. So if you have the opportunity to go out to networking events, I say go out and do it, and ultimately look to try to find yourself your what we call it like the circle of influence, right? These people that are adjacent to you. So, for example, if you meet someone who is a healthcare insurance broker who may or may not be targeting the same companies and the same buyer persona as you are, there may be some opportunities to work together from a sharing leads perspective. But point being, like networking events, I think are becoming more and more popular. And I would say get back out there. Like if you can. I realize some people are national. It's not easily said. There's obviously the virtual option, go networking as well. But I would highly recommend for everybody, if you have an opportunity to get face to face somebody, by all means take it. I think people are really, really, from a prospect side, are really yearning for that again. So buyer persona, the first slide, I think most people probably have some sort of version of that in terms of like what they're researching. If you want like an even fuller dive on that, I've written a couple articles on just like a quick 5 minute breakdown of how you can go about researching companies on that slide I just showed you. The buyer persona piece, though, I think this is where a lot, I'd say 90+% of people miss the mark because I ask the question all the time with my clients, hey, what keeps your prospects up at night? And more often than not, it's a thought, it's a stump, it stumps them when it comes to like an answer, right? Because most people's immediate reaction is going to talk about hiring side of stuff. And as I like to point out, that's not what your prospects go to bed thinking about, right? They go to bed thinking about what is their boss pressuring them to get accomplished? What are their KPIs? What are their metrics? What are their goals, right? Ultimately, what is their job function and what is it that stresses them out that's not being accomplished as a result of the open role, right? Think beyond just, hey, open roles. Think the downstream, as it says on here. Think of the downstream impact that is occurring as a result of maybe long time to fill or open roles or retention problems, turnover, whatever. Like go beyond that though and say, hey, because of X, most likely Y is occurring. Meaning, if I am talking to let's say a director of IT and they've got some software engineer role open, like, yeah, that's a pain point, but what's the downstream effect? Is it a lack of products being launched on time? Is it mounting, I don't know, debugging issues that they're having to deal with? Is it added stress to their team? Are they having to work overtime? Is the manager himself having or herself having to get back into the seat and become a software engineer again and do the work of one of their subordinates due to the open position? We want to think downstream. That's what it says on here. Think beyond the hiring. Think of the impact it has on the manager. Excuse me, the hiring manager is probably better saying it. The hiring manager, the company itself, and ultimately the team. If we can start looking at it that way, we can ultimately start creating messaging that speaks towards those pain points and problems to get them to actually want to have a conversation with us. And I talked about in the beginning too about some AI prompts. Here's one of them right now. Asterisk around this is I'm a big believer of doing this exercise without using AI to start. The reason being is AI is not going to sit on the discovery meetings with you. AI is not going to be on the cold calls with you, right? You need to understand personally what keeps your prospects up at night. And if you do this exercise, like I did with a client last week, we literally just pulled an Excel doc and I said, okay, we're targeting these buyer personas. What is the pain point for a CEO in the Bay Area in hardware tech when it comes to an open role? And we literally brainstormed, okay, this is what's probably the downstream effect. This is what's going to occur. Here's the pain points. Here's where it gets worse, so on and so forth. And then after that point, we then went to AI and helped us reshape a few ideas. But ultimately, I want you to start thinking this way and doing these things yourself, because when you're in that discovery meeting and someone brings up some sort of pain, you can dig into it deeper and have a better understanding because you took the time to understand their world. Again, it's all about they and them, not about you. But with all that said, I do have a little bit of cheat code when it comes to using an AI prompt to help you get to understanding, hey, well, this is most likely some of the downstream negative effects that are occurring, the pain points, what ultimately what's keeping them up at night due to some of the labor challenges that they're facing right now. Okay, so I'll pause here. Quick recap again, right? We've got our ICP, we've got our target accounts, we've done some research on the accounts. We started building out our buyer persona battle card, meaning I'm targeting, right? For example, going back to the individual I just referenced, Bay Area hardware tech startup companies that are experiencing 10% headcount or more, that'd be an ICP. Now within there, the people I'm going after are going to be the CEO, the CTO, the VP, and the director of IT. Like those would be my four buyer personas. And then with each one of those, I'm actually building out buyer persona battle cards for each one of them. What are the pain points? What ultimately keeps the CEO up at night is very different than what keeps the director of IT up at night. But by mapping that all out, it will allow me to then improve and become more efficient with what we're about to cover here with some of our outreach, which how we engage with these individuals because we understand their world now and we're able to speak to those pain points as a result of doing this exercise and taking the time to actually understand this stuff. So building outreach engine, I love to always throw out this stat as kind of like a starting point. I don't know if it's both I don't know if it's depressing to know this stuff or not, but I think it is helpful because I'm a numbers process driven guy, obviously. So I always like to look to what does the data say. And the big thing I want to point out here is the number of touches it takes to get a meeting. In today's world, and the number keeps increasing, unfortunately. HubSpot, Salesforce, they roll out reports basically every year and the numbers increased over the last couple of years when it comes to actually getting a meeting. And we're talking 8 touches or more now with a particular individual to actually get some face time, which, yes, it can seem like a lot. Obviously, the number increasing means there's more work to be put into it, which is somewhat of the depressing part. But I think some of the motivating part is also in that same report. They'll tell you that most people give up by the fourth touch. It's something like 90% of people give up by the fourth touch. I think it's something like 50% give up by the first touch, which is to me is like mind-boggling to think that part. But just knowing that simple stat tells me, right, as the person out there doing the outreach, if I'm willing to just simply put in the effort, right? If I'm willing to put in 9 quality touches, key point there being quality, but if I put in 9 quality touches, I'm already better than 90% of the competition out there. So simply by putting in effort, I can be better than my competition. Now, of course, we want the messaging to resonate. We want it to be relevant. We want it to stand out. We want to get their attention. Of course, all of those things. But if you are willing to, and we'll cover this in a second, if you're willing to actually map out a 9 touch or more process, you will be better than 90% of your competition. If you leave today's call knowing just that alone, you're going to be setting yourself up for a better end of year / into 2026 as well. Multi-channel approach, because people always, hey, what are your must-haves when it comes to outreach? I always tell them, hey, 9+ touches and multi-channel, meaning do not play in only one channel. If you're strong on email, start adding LinkedIn to it. If you're great at LinkedIn, but not so great at email, start adding email anyways. If you don't use the phone at all, try to mix in 1 or 2 cold calls, right? Try to pick up that phone, try to get that number, because ultimately our job is to understand where our prospects want to be met at. Some prospects never sign into LinkedIn. So if you're spending all of your time doing LinkedIn messaging to those individuals, you're never going to get through to them because they don't use that channel. But by mixing in other channels, we can try to figure out which one will actually be the right one for that particular individual. And actually, one of the best stories I always tell people is I worked with someone who was in the blockchain space. And we were building out some sequences and we were using LinkedIn, email, phone call. After a few weeks, the data was saying, hey, we're not getting a ton of results. And on the call, he even said, hey, hold on, I got to message this founder real back on Telegram. I was like, hey, Harrison, what is this? He's like, well, it's a messaging app. He's like, a lot of people within the crypto / blockchain space really use Telegram. A lot of them post on Twitter too. He's like, he made the joke. He's like, I don't really CEOs have time to build a company. They're always tweeting out there. I was like, wait, hold on. You're telling me they live in both Telegram and Twitter, and our sequence is not even in those channels. Like I wasn't even aware of those. So we completely revamped it, and we spent more time in Telegram, more time using Twitter DMs and outreach that way, or X, I guess technically it's called. And he was able to actually land his 75K retainer 1 month later because we met his prospects where they want to be met at. And that's why I think it's so important, though, to have a multi-channel approach to ensure we're covering all of our bases. If you're not great at cold calling, or you're not great at writing emails, or you don't feel comfortable sending in LinkedIn voice notes, I would say to you, learn to get at least somewhat comfortable. Like, try it out, see where he goes with it. You're going to flub it, you're going to make some mistakes, but that's ultimately is sales, anyways. You're constantly out there trying new things. You're going to fail from time to time, and that's okay. Because again, going back to that first stat I said, if you're willing to put in the effort to get to 9 touches and do it from a multi-channel perspective, you will be better off than 90% of your competition. Multiple entry points per account. I kind of very briefly hit on about the four buyer personas, right? CEO, CTO, VP, director. That would mean to me that is building out the org chart chain, right? That is saying, hey, I'm going to build out not just the C-suite, right? I want to build out all the individuals I may or may not want to get in front of at some point during the buying process. And by having multiple entry points, you will have multiple opportunities to actually start a conversation, right? Think of it like, unfortunately, my Chicago Cubs just got eliminated, but I always like to bring up baseball, right? A major league player that goes up to bat and goes 0 for 1, are they a bad hitter or not? The answer is I don't know. It was only one at bat. If they go 0 for 1,000, the data says they're pretty bad at it, right? If they go 300 for 600, they're at 500, they're world class. They're one of the best. The point being is one time is not enough. We need to have multiple at bats. In this case, as I'm trying to use this metaphor, is we need to have multiple entry points because if we swing and miss with one person, that's okay. We get another at bat, so to speak, by going after the director or going after the VP or going after the supervisor or whomever else it is within the account that we'd want to get in front of because it just increases our odds of actually getting a hit, so to speak, aka getting a meeting, which we can then snowball into other meetings with their peers. That'll get us to get in front of the director, maybe the VP, and we have a buying committee that brings us to the decision maker. And all that is accomplished because we didn't just stop and say, well, I didn't get in front of this one particular decision maker, time to move on. No, we need to find other decision makers, other entry points in the account as well. This last bullet point too, create a story with your outreach. I have it covered here in the next slide as well, but overall, I always like to tell this one is think of your outreach as one giant chapter book, right? My kids love to read. Recently just like finished up the Harry Potter series. My kids are really into it. Each chapter within Harry Potter in and of itself is it's a great chapter, right? It adds to the story from the previous chapters. Your outreach should be the same thing, meaning there is no just checking in, following up in the last message, like, did you hear that? Or did you see this email? Are you interested? Like short little, like just check-in type emails, get them out. They don't add anything to the story. There's no value added to the book that you're trying to build. So why send it? Our outreach should build on the previous outreaches. Each outreach in and of itself should be a chapter we want to read, so to speak. And then if we do capture the attention of that prospect, if they go back and look at some of the other outreaches, it then only makes the story stronger. Building outreach too, just like, and I said 9 touches, but just again, as I said, I want everyone here leaving with like self-assessing your own sales system. So I just want to kind of walk through a ways you can go about doing it. Break it down by channel. One recommendation I would say is lean into your strengths, but also like as I said before, if you're not great at cold calling, try to give me 1 or 2 attempts in there within the outreach sequence itself. And of course, like create your scripts, do some practice runs. Of course, that's I think important, but also like don't be afraid to add them in there, even if you haven't done a ton of it as well. But make sure it's all planned out, right? From, okay, I found this new director of IT. Step 1 is this. Step 2 is this. Step 3 is this. Like everything should be mapped out. So one, leads don't slip through the cracks because that has happened to me before. And there's nothing worse than finding out so-and-so went with your competitor and you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot step 4 and they never continued on the sequence and I lost out on what could have been potential business. We don't want that. So it's one thing is having this all mapped out ensures that we can ultimately move people along and they don't slip through the cracks. The other thing too is it allows us to, and this is probably the next slide, I believe, identify bottlenecks in our outreach. It also allows us to identify where things are going well and where things are going poorly. So if we've come to find out that like email, let's say it's touch point 8 and it's an email, and for whatever reason that email is converting at twice the rate we normally do, well, I would say, hey, look, if it's doing so well, what if we moved it from step 8 to step 4? Maybe we can shorten the outreach cycle because the data says that email, what we're using, is working at twice the normal rate. So let's see if we can work it earlier in the process to try to get conversations started sooner. Also, on the flip side, if we say, hey, a lot of leads are falling off at step 7, you might say, okay, well, what is step 7? Like, what are we saying here? Is my cold call script? Is it my email? Is it my LinkedIn voice note, right? Like a lot of leads are being lost here. A lot of people are telling me no. What am I saying there? Because maybe it needs to be changed as a result of what the data is telling me. Other things too is I don't think you should do more than 3 touches, like in the same channel in a row. So, for example, if you're using email, I think after that third email, it's time to one, give that thread a break, right? Move on to a different thread. And two, mix in another channel. Do something on LinkedIn, pick up a phone call. Hell, if you want to go old school, snail mail, like I've helped some clients do some creative outreach stuff, like I learned in my ADP days. You can do some really fun old school outreach from snail mail that leads to some meetings that, because a lot of people aren't playing in that channel as well. But point being is like max 3, especially on LinkedIn side too, because you can't start a new thread in LinkedIn, unfortunately. So they could see like, oh my gosh, this person's reached out 47 times over the last 12 days. Like you probably don't want that. That goes on stalker vibes, right? You don't want to go that far. I believe in being pleasantly persistent, but you also don't want to burn down bridges by being so aggressive that they remember you slash hate you moving forward. Varying timing too. I think it's worth trying. Like I think there's times where you're going to be, hopefully, I should say, you should have a good operating day-to-day operating rhythm where you're doing some of your BD stuff. I would always recommend, hey, if Tuesday morning's your BD time, don't be afraid to do Thursday afternoon if that's your next touch point for that particular grouping of people you're reaching out to. Just because you never know if you're always reaching out the same day at 9 a.m. to the same person, well, what if they always had a standing 9 a.m. meeting? And maybe they were interested, but you always caught them at a bad time because they're in the meeting. So like, don't be afraid to change up your times as well. The one piece too I did actually unfortunately skipped over real quick. I want to go back to is having your buyer personas bucketed too. So if we have those buyer personas bucketed, right? The director of IT again, for example, what that allows us to do moving forward, and we're going to cover here in email in a second, you can use too from a copywriting framework. But if we have it bucketed, what that allows us to do moving forward is the next time we come across a Bay Area IT company that we've never heard about. The moment we go in, we do a quick prospect. Okay, here's my 5 buyer personas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got them, director of IT, great. I've got my director of IT sequence slash email outreach already built out. I just drop them in and I start executing. So if we have this done correctly, it allows us to be more efficient moving forward. This certainly is one of those times as you do build this out, you're gonna have to slow down right now in order to speed up later on. But trust me, it is worth it. If you do this the right way, you'll be able to become more and more efficient as time goes on because you've already got some pre-built processes. From the moment you find a new lead, there is no thinking anymore. There's simply executing on the steps you've already laid out for yourself. I said there too, right? Avoid the checking in. I just want to make sure I reiterate that enough because the amount of people still doing this today, it's exhausting, right? And I'm sure we've all, I mean, even on LinkedIn, right? People are probably hitting everyone up in this group too on LinkedIn, and we all get the just checking an email. And if you ever get that, or LinkedIn voice note, or LinkedIn text, whatever, your first thought is, ugh, why did I read this thing? No value to it. Cut it from your vocab, cut it from your outreach altogether, and you'll be better off as a result. I already talked about these things too, about if you do have it mapped out right. Again, more efficient. We can identify the bottlenecks, aka where things are falling off, where it's going wrong. How do we make some changes? Right. For example, I have a client who's using Lemlist. We got on a call last week, and we recognized one of his emails in particular had it was half the open rate than the rest of them had, and it was looking at it we said, okay, let's go in and make some changes to the subject line slash first sentence because when you're sending emails, that's what people see first. And based on what the data was telling us, we identified the bottleneck was that particular one. So we made the update. We'll find out here at the end of the week when we get together if there's any noticeable change. But the point being is we did see the bottleneck because we had it all mapped out and systematized. We can say, okay, based on everything else you've done, this is a weak point in our process because the data says so. Kind of overall like what to say, right? Not to get too much into it, although I am in the next slide, 'cause I'm gonna give you a framework you can use. But when doing some of your outreach, I think there's a multitude of ways of how you can go about reaching out to individuals and just like overall, like high level stuff. Education, value, pain based. Those are the three ones, right? Education meaning like sending news articles about that particular person's industry. One of my favorite things is, hey, I came across this article, made me think of you, give it a read, right? No big ask, not asking for a meeting. I'm simply saying there's something that made me think of this particular prospect or their company or whatever. I'm shooting it over to them. I'm trying to provide some education about them and their world, not about me, them and their world too. Value as well, which again, people might say, hey, what is value? Like, I think education, thought leadership, any of that is value added. I think also understanding like what's going on in the space. Maybe they are hiring. Maybe they told you, hey, look, we've got a TA team in place, or we've got some other vendors. We don't really need you right now. It's, hey, okay, that's fine. But I'm going to set up a value next touch point. I'm going to educate them about the market and say, hey, based on our conversation before, you mentioned the role is open for 12 weeks. On average, roles should be filled in 6 weeks or less. I'm gonna try, and here's how it's done, right? That is a value added outreach message as far as I'm concerned. And then the pain based one, which goes back to the buyer personas, right? What keeps them up at night. We'll cover that in the next slide, but you can go and create messaging all centered around what it is that keeps them, what is the pains that they're experiencing, and ultimately trying to throw in a soft solution slash call to action to get a conversation started. And the last piece too is once this is all built out, you yourself, if you're a sole operator, you can obviously become more efficient. If you've got a team though, you can then deploy it with your team and say, hey, here's the new process going forward, right? I got a call with someone last week. They're about $50 million firm. They've got multitude of different verticals. This particular manager had a 5-person team. And he even said, one of the first things he said in the call was, hey, everyone's doing their own thing. Like everyone just kind of does things the way that they do it. There was no system in place. There was no ability to track and refine and better understand what is and what is not working because he had nothing to deploy to his team. So if you take the time to do this stuff, you can deploy it out to your team. You can also, when you're adding headcounts, you can say, hey, based on our own success, here's the formula to follow. And kind of I always like to tell people too is the reason why the bigger firms, and I work for two of the largest ones, the reason why the bigger firms are successful is because they've got this stuff mapped out and they're able to deploy it with new hires. I mean, most large firms, the Aerotechs, the Medics, those firms hire fresh grads right off the bat. And they say, hey, follow this. Basically, here's the playbook, follow it, execute on it. Now, there's a lot of turnover in this space, as we know. Not everyone even makes it to a year long, but those that end up being successful, it's because they follow a tried and true path that was given to them by people that were there first. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here as well. And Ben, I see that, yeah, make sure to drop. Yeah, I see questions popping through, guys. Like, I should have clarified. There's time at the end for Q&A too. I'll make sure to try to answer everyone's question as well. I just want to, again, my own personal goal is everyone leaves here today with a plan of how to execute something, like literally this afternoon, to go about doing some of the stuff I'm teaching today. This is not an infomercial. This isn't about Keely and what he does. This is to help you have a great Q4, set you up for a great Q1 in 2026 and beyond. So, email outreach, right? This is one of the things I want to leave you with today that you can use if we've done it correctly, right? If we've taken our buyer personas, and again, I'm going to keep using Director of IT as an example just to keep that common thread. Director of IT, I understand their pain points. I understand what keeps them up at night. How do I then turn that into messaging? And one of my favorite, it's called the copywriting framework. It's called Pain Agitate Solution, stands for PASS. What I'll show you here is actually an email I created with one of my clients together where we took that framework, took some of the pain points we had heard from our clients and from our prospects and turned it into an email outreach based off of that information. And it's the next slide. So I guess I jumped ahead there, but overall, just email outreach, right? And I already talked about that client with the subject line, like we want short and sweet, right? Think of it like your hook. This is what gets people to open it. I want to say it's something like 60% of emails are open on your mobile now today. So if you're ever like unsure of what the subject line slash opening sentence looks like, send an email to yourself. Like I still do it to this day. I'll send an email to myself. I'll take a quick look at my phone like this. And I'll say, oh, cool. Like there's a little preview of here's the subject line, here's the opening sentence. Like, does that capture my attention? If the answer is yes, and we capture it in the right way, I should say, we're not just going for absurdity to capture attention because that would lead to a problem once they actually open it. But if we capture their attention to say, okay, I want to open it, that's a good subject line slash first sentence because I think it's roughly 45, 50 characters, I want to say, in that first sentence that'll show up on the preview as well. So we want to make sure when we're creating this, we do not waste that valuable real estate that shows up on people's phone because we want them to look at it, say, interesting, let me click on it. If they click on it and open it, we've already gone through that first gate, so to speak, of getting them to actually read what we have to say. And this is what I talk about with pain agitate solution. So past formula, we're identifying their specific problem. We're trying to agitate it, right? With the downstream effects I was talking about, right? Because an open position's a pain, right? It's a pain, but like, is it really that big of a deal? They may or may not even be aware how big of it is. Maybe to them, that's how it always is, right? They might not even realize it is a problem. They might say, hey, Keely, like, no, it always takes us 16 weeks to fill this role. And I'm sitting here, well, the average is 6.5 weeks. So like you're 10 weeks behind, which is leading to X, Y, and Z, right? That's the agitate part. I'm making it worse and worse. I'm taking a pain point and I'm pointing out the downstream and negative effects of said pain point. And then we present our solution and then ultimately a soft call to action. And when I say soft call to action, a lot of people will start with hard call to actions, meaning do you have do you have time on Tuesday or Wednesday of next week? That to me is a hard call to action. You're giving me really no way out of this other than saying yes or no. I have to either give you time on my calendar, which most people are very protective of today, or I have to tell you no. And ultimately, as I said right at the start of this entire talk, our job is to start conversations. So instead of a hard call to action, a soft call to action is something like, hey, interested in hearing more. I'm not asking for time on your calendar. I'm just simply asking, hey, I'm interested. Are you interested in hearing more of what I have to say? Or is it worth a chat? Or can I be of help? Right? Any of those stuff. Like I'm not asking for time. There is no hard. I'm just trying to get you to respond and start a dialogue with me. Because once a dialogue started, I can have a back and forth that may lead to the meeting, or at the very least, even a little bit back and forth. I may come to find that they're not the right fit, which great, as we said before, get them out. Or I may come to find, hey, look, now's just not the right time. There's some interest, but they told me no. They're a little bit too busy, but I learned some valuable information. Great. I can use that now and the next time I reach out to them because I'm going to document that stuff in my CRM. I'm going to make sure I use them in my next outreach. I'm going to build on that story based on the stuff I learned in that conversation. All right. I'll pull up the slide. It should have been there. The past email, I redid some stuff, so apparently it disappeared. And maybe I moved it further on, so hopefully it's there. But if it's not, when we get in the QA, make sure I pull up that past email. I know I put it together in the at the end with the link if you want to get all the slides. It'll be in there as well. But ultimately, like trying to put it all together, like everything we've talked about, because I've now talked for about 50 minutes now straight to bring it all together, like this slide right here kind of encompasses everything we've talked about, right? Identify the right accounts, your ICP, which again stands for ideal client profile, right? Who it is, company size, industry, geographical area. I'm a big proponent of geographical area personally because we don't sell SaaS, right? And I did sell SaaS for a couple of years. I was successful in that space, but ultimately, what SaaS has that we do not is the ability to work anywhere and deploy at any time. Meaning, if I'm prospecting in New York one day, Chicago the next day, LA the third day, if I get yeses in all three markets, I just turn it on and the software is up and running. That's not how it works in the recruiting space. If I land a client in New York, but all of my cancer in Chicago, we have a mismatch of problems, which is why I think it's so important to try to dominate a geographical area as much as possible in the beginning stages of your business. The reason being is as you build up that talent pool, let's say it's Chicago, my home market, if I've got one client with some roles, I've got three good candidates, and one gets the offer, the other two don't, well, do I have other clients I can NPC them out to? Do I have other places I can reach out to? Because my talent pool is concentrated in there. I want my clients to be concentrated in there as well. So I get multiple opportunities of placing someone at a client. So that's why, again, I just think it's so important to try to dominate a geographical area as much as humanly possible. Research before you engage, right? Build a multi-channel outreach. Create internal champions. I talked about this briefly. I mean, you can do a whole topic around this, but I think it's so important, especially in today. If you go back to that Salesforce and HubSpot report, while it's typically geared towards the software space in terms of some of the data points when it comes to buying decisions, it is becoming more and more obvious, though, there's buying committees, meaning most people in an organization don't make the decision alone, meaning they get feedback from their peers, they get people together, aka they'll talk to their managers, their VPs, their directors, and they'll say, hey, do we want to work with this firm or not? And I think creating those internal champions, like getting together your own buying committee, meaning like getting your managers to rally together to sell you and your company on their behalf to their bosses is the way to shorten sales cycles. It's a way to get new clients as a result, and it's a way to ultimately grow your business too. Systemize and scale. Again, I've said that at nauseum, but document your processes. You may be already doing some of this stuff and not even realizing it. Honestly, one of the things you could do is, and I've told you I'm not the biggest fan of AI with some of the things, but you could for this is literally just pull up like ChatGPT or Claude, pay $20 a month, and just talk to it and talk through all the things you do on a day-to-day basis, help it document your processes, and ultimately help it create your own playbook that you may or may not be able to deploy with your team if you have one. And then if you do that, you're able to refine this thing. You can refine it over week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter, ultimately scale. Hey, this is working, this isn't, get rid of this, let's add this, let's do that. And we can then make this a more and more efficient and more higher and higher conversions as a result of having this all documented as well. So final thoughts I'm gonna cover here in terms of like this theme or kind of this today's topic in general. I'm the first to admit everything I've talked about today, it's not flashy, it's not sexy, it's honestly not even that much fun. To be honest, this is hard work. It is like mentally taxing trying to think like your buyer personas. It's hard to come up with the right outreach to build these sequences, all this stuff. But I firmly believe this is the foundation for your sales system. If you're not doing this, you will have problems that will show up down the road. It may not be right now, but it inevitably become a problem. It's like going back to sports, and I'm a big metaphor guy. In training camp, you always work on the fundamentals to start. If they were to skip all this stuff, you're going to experience some problems throughout the season. I think the same applies for sales. This is the boring part of the job. But one of my favorite quotes is success is hidden in the boring basics. It's not actually hidden, it's just people aren't willing to put in the work to do the boring basics. So in essence, it is hidden. But if you are willing to put in this work, focus on the fundamentals, these boring basics, and build from there, you will be successful compared to your competition, compared to your peers, compared to everyone else, because you're willing to put in the work and build from the fundamental side. When this is done right, it will make your life easier. I promise you that. You do this the right way, you build it the right way, you can apply the same fundamentals, the same frameworks 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 24 months from now, right? In today's day and age, there's new tech, there's new tools, there's all this flashy stuff. At times, it can feel like your head's going to explode and looking all that. But if you focus on this part, like building these fundamentals, the tools become secondary to that. They just get added in here or there as a result. They're not the magic bullet to your BD. They're just more of a supplement to what you're already doing, what you're doing correctly. Last piece too, start small, build from there. Meaning, do not walk in on Monday or even this afternoon for that matter. Don't walk in and say, awesome, that talk last week with Keely was great. I got his slides. I'm gonna implement all this stuff. And I'm gonna do 50 outreaches today. I would say no. Like if I were working directly with you, I'd tell you, do not do that. Anyone that's ever worked with me, I always start the same way. Give me five. Give me five outreaches today. And then tomorrow, give me six. And then the next day, give me seven and keep building from there. The reason being is if you go well above anything you've already done, you may be able to do it for one day, but you're going to burn yourself out. You're not going to want to do it the next day. And ultimately, it's going to become inconsistent. And that gets us nowhere, right? My favorite, again, a big metaphor guy, if anyone can't tell by now, my favorite thing is to point out it's like going to work out. Anyone can go to the gym for one day and go a million miles per hour, have a great workout, and then the next day, what are they? They're sore as hell. They don't show up. And the next day rolls around, they're still sore. They don't really show up. And the next day rolls down, like, maybe I'll go around, but I'll do a lot less because that Monday workout was really, really hard. I just don't have it in me anymore. You get to a week later, come to find out they only worked out once. They didn't really do anything at all because they were too sore. They tried too hard, and ultimately they didn't build. They didn't build the muscle that is needed to work its way up to get to the point where you can work out every day. And the same applies for sales. It is a BD muscle. Start small, make sure you can get it done, and the next day add one more. Maybe the next day add two more, and just keep slowly building it because it will lead to positive momentum. And if you've got momentum on your side, you actually want to show up and you're going to want to do this, and you'll start seeing some success, which ultimately lead you'll be more excited to want to do it the next day. And you're going to, before you know it, over the course of a month and a half, 2 months, yeah, maybe you can do 50 outreaches a day. But had you done that on day one, you would have set yourself up for failure. So I just cannot reiterate this enough. Please start small and build up from there. All right, so we're about to get the Q&A, but I want to make sure talk a little bit about myself, right? And probably not even myself, to be honest. I had a client last week who's her brilliant idea that I should be talking a little bit about this. So in my space, right, the coaches, consultant, if you've spent any time on LinkedIn, there's a bunch of us out there. And one of my clients, Samantha, she said, she's like, look, people don't even know how to evaluate people like you. To which I said, that's a great point. I wanted everyone to leave today with saying, hey, how do I evaluate someone like Keely? And honestly, use me. If you ever get on a call with me, if you decide to connect me on LinkedIn, you want to know a little bit more what I do, like ask me these questions. But if you're evaluating people like me, right? Coaches, consultants, hell, even lead gen agencies, which I put in a different bucket, but ultimately, like they're an external resource, someone you would be paying for either knowledge or outputs. Make sure you are judging them using some sort of process, shocker, they're from Keeley, some sort of way to evaluate them. And I want to put together a few of my thoughts here, right? Systems, can't reiterate that enough, but of course, that's me and my businesses around systems, not just like random advice you see from time to time on LinkedIn. It sounds flashy, yeah, it sounds good, but like that's only one piece of advice. Like, do you have a system to follow? And hopefully, after today's talk, you can see Keely does map this all out. There is a system for you to follow and implement starting on day one. Does align with your business model, right? If you're talking to a coach or consultant who's only worked with $100 million plus firms and you're a $5 million firm, like, is there a alignment issue? Maybe. I think there could be some problems there too. The other piece as well, and I even have it on here, is make sure like their philosophy aligns with yours. Meaning, if you're trying to, let's say, accomplish business from more of a marketing side, right? You want to do thought leadership, you want to create newsletters and videos and podcasts and stuff, and you're sitting there talking to a sales consultant like me, well, I'm not the right fit, right? And I would tell you that. I had a client 2 months ago now. We parted ways after 1 month because the alignment wasn't there. They wanted to go that more marketing piece. I'm more of a sales guy. And ultimately, we decided, hey, let's part ways because we are not the right fit for each other. Process before personality, right? There's some people, they're great. They're great on the phone. They present really well on LinkedIn. But ultimately, like, process is what's going to build you and your company's revenue, not the charisma that the person has on that fall. Like, don't be afraid, as it says right there. Don't be afraid to ask, hey, show me some of your frameworks, show me some of the testimonials. Hell, if you want to ask to talk to some of the people that they've worked with, like, do not be afraid to ask those questions. People have asked that of me, and I've set them up with some of my past clients who will talk on my behalf. Like, you should be properly vetting people like us. Commitment to implementation, too. I have it on here. Just handing you a playbook, like, it's great. It's a good starting point. But there's constant, as I've said before, like with the territory plan or the email or the subject line, right? There's constantly ever evolving, changing, updating. Like, this is an ongoing process. And if that coach slash consultant is not going to help from an implementation perspective, that is a gap as far as I'm concerned in their offering. And if they're just selling a digital product, hey, you know what you're getting into. But if you're working with them in a one-on-one capacity, they should be able to help you implement. They should be help you iterate, refine, redeploy, and ultimately get better at your craft. And as the last piece here, right? Don't hire a consultant to just inspire you, right? Hire one who can actually help build your business, get placements, and ultimately grow revenue.